Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Indie Pop Girl, the podcast for music chat, new releases, hidden gems, and nostalgic deep dives. I am back and we are continuing with the Indie Classic series, and for this week, I am also continuing the theme of iconic frontwomen, and this time the spotlight is on Karen O, and I'll be discussing It's Blitz from the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, which was released way back in 2009. It's Blitz is the third studio album by American indie rock band the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, released on the 5th of March 2009 by Interscope Records. The record was produced by Nick Launay, who had previously worked with the likes of INXS, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, and most recently Amyl and the Sniffers. He was assisted by David Andrew Seatek from TV on the Radio. The album marked a real shift in sound. It moved away from the lo-fi indie punk of their debut and blended synth pop and disco elements into the band's sonic palette. The record received critical acclaim and was nominated for Best Alternative Music Album at the 2010 Grammy Awards. What made It's Blitz feel so significant at the time was how bold the shift sounded. The Yeah Yeah Yeahs had built their reputation on gritty, art punk, don't give a fuck energy with sharp guitars and raw vocals and a kind of chaotic cool that defined the early 2000s indie. But by 2009, the musical landscape was changing. Indie bands were beginning to embrace electronics more openly, and It's Blitz captured that transition perfectly. Instead of losing their identity, the band sharpened it. The band refused to make another Fever to Tell Part 2, the record that put them on the map. There are still some elements from their previous record, Show Your Bones, sprinkled here and there into It's Blitz, but they really made a statement sonically with this record. The melodies are stronger, leaning more into a pop soundscape, still with the indie foundations. Karen O still sounds as wonderful as ever, and this time she's backed with a wall of synths and atmosphere. And listening back now, the record still sounds as fresh as it did back in 2009. 2009 really was the era for iTunes and iPods and playing Rock Band on the Xbox. It was so much fun, and through the Rock Band and Guitar Hero games, you ended up being exposed to artists and songs that were completely new to you, and that was the case for me in discovering the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. Maps was included on Rock Band in the track list, and I remember that we had to learn the song in the career mode so we could unlock further content within the game. I had heard of the name before, but Maps was my entry point and I loved it instantly. Of course, it made me intrigued and I wanted to check out their discography. Around this time was the actual release of It's Blitz, and if you remember how iTunes looked back in the day, it was quite easy to discover something new as the album artworks were quite prominent in the homepage when you had to plug in your iPod. But it was so exciting discovering a new band and having all this new music to discover. I remember watching the Zero video on YouTube just as a little taster and I lost my shit. And I couldn't wait to download the record, so off to iTunes I went. If you are a regular listener to the podcast, then you know how much I love synths and electronica. I had no expectations at all with this record. I went in completely not knowing what to expect, but All I knew was that I loved Zero and couldn't wait to listen to the rest of the record. So I purchased the record and I put it on my purple iPod. I was listening to a lot of music around that time as it was before I passed my driving test. So I was walking to work and I needed records that kept me going, that kept me energized, and this record was the perfect soundtrack. I have some lovely memories attached to this record. My partner, now my husband, and I saw them live for the first time in Sheffield, and it was fantastic. It's fascinating seeing the growth and evolution of this band, that they refuse to sit in one lane. We played this record to death in the car, and when I started to collect vinyl, I knew that its Blitz was something that was essential, and I had to add it to my collection. I also had to include this record as part of the Indie Classic series, as it really embraced the synths and electronica within indie music and helped to shape what followed. In many ways, it felt slightly ahead of the curve, hinting at the pop direction the 2010s would move toward. And when I think of the indie pop universe, its Blitz sits right at the centre of it. As I've mentioned in previous episodes, I will not be playing clips of the songs, so if you are curious, then please support the artists I cover by streaming, downloading, or buying physical copies. Thank you. Track 1, Zero. What a way to open a record. Zero doesn't ease you in, it launches you straight onto the dance floor. From the very first beat, it gives you this rush of adrenaline that's almost impossible to ignore. It moves like a freight train. It's relentless, pulsing, and completely unstoppable. The production here is phenomenal. Every element feels intentional. The synth line is sharp and immediate, but it's never overwhelming. It sits perfectly alongside the driving drums and those tight controlled guitars. Nothing feels cluttered, nothing feels wasted. It's polished, but it still has bite and grit, which I'm here for. And then there's Karen. Her vocal is absolutely the star of the show. We already knew she could command a track, but there's something different about her performance here. It's playful and full of character and passion, but there's also this underlying confidence that feels brand new. She doesn't just sing the melody, she performs it. You can hear the attitude in every line. And hearing this in 2009 felt like a breath of fresh air. The 2000s had been dominated by indie and rock bands, and after a while, a lot of it started to blur together. Zero proved you could still carry that indie rock energy, but inject it with colour, movement, and personality. It didn't abandon their roots, it evolved them. And honestly, as the kids would say, they absolutely ate with this one and left no crumbs. It's bold, it's immediate, it's addictive, and it sets the tone for everything that follows. It's stunning. Track 2, Heads Will Roll. And speaking of stunning, we move straight into Heads Will Roll. And if you are familiar with the band's earlier work, you probably never would have predicted them to deliver something this disco leaning, but they went for it and they absolutely pulled it off. This track is drenched in glitter and gloss. and it feels completely ready for the dance floor. Like Zero, it doesn't hold back. It builds and builds, giving you more with every section. The synths really take centre stage here. It's sleek, hypnotic, and just slightly menacing. There's something really addictive about this track, and it locks into your brain almost instantly. Karen's vocals bring that signature intensity. She sounds commanding, almost theatrical, but never overdone. There's passion in her delivery, and she knows exactly when to pull back and when to push forward. It all ties together so seamlessly, the production, the atmosphere, and the drama. And this is what I keep coming back to. You can listen to this now, and it doesn't sound dated, not even slightly. The production feels forward thinking, almost ahead of its time. It anticipated the way indie and pop would collide in the 2010s. That bridge is just heavenly. It somehow lifts the track to another level, adding tension before that final explosion. It's one of those moments where you can almost see the strobe lights flashing. There are remixes of this track that take it into completely different territory, and they're fun, but for me, nothing beats the original. This is the version that will always make it onto my indie disco playlist. Track 3, Soft Shock. We get a slight change of pace with Soft Shock, but the electronic elements are still very much present. This one feels more restrained and more intimate, like the album taking a breath without losing momentum. Karen's vocals are noticeably softer here, and she's mixed much closer to the front. It feels deliberate, almost like she's singing right next to you. There's something incredibly intimate about it. You can hear every nuance and every little inflection of her vocals. And I adore her whispered ad libs on this track. And this is what I love most about Karen as a vocalist. She really uses her voice like an instrument. She knows exactly when to bring power and when to pull everything back. That control, that dynamic range is what makes her so compelling as a vocalist. Yes, she can be explosive, gives us the screams, but she can also be very delicate, and Soft Shock really highlights that softer side. Brian Chase's drums are slightly heavier in the mix here, and as the song progresses, they become more prominent. There's this subtle build happening underneath the surface, and it keeps you completely engaged. The band are so clever at shifting textures. Just when you think you've settled into the mood, something subtly changes. And I have to mention Nick Zenner. He's such an underrated guitarist. His strength isn't about flashy solos or dominating the track. It's about texture. He layers in atmosphere, adds tension, and fills space in a way that feels intentional rather than showy. On Soft Shock, his contribution is subtle but essential, and it's all about mood. It's a beautiful track, understated and underrated, but deeply effective. Track 4, Skeletons. I'll always remember the first time I heard Skeletons. I was completely floored by it. There's something about Karen's vocal here that just hits differently. It's vulnerable, slightly fragile, but still powerful. It almost feels like she's holding something back emotionally, and that restraint makes it even more affecting. This is one of those performances that just stays with you. Whenever I hear this song, I always think of their triumphant Glastonbury performance. The way they performed this track on that stage was incredible. Even now, I still get goosebumps listening to it. The way the track unfolds is just beautiful. It doesn't rush, it slowly builds, layer by layer, letting the atmosphere develop naturally. Those synths and subtle electronic flourishes create this shimmering, almost dreamlike space around her voice. It feels expansive but intimate at the same time. Yes, this band can deliver aggressive punk moments. We've heard that side of them, but Skeletons proves that they can also create something deeply powerful and emotionally rich with immaculate production. It shows their range. Honestly, I could listen to this for another 5 minutes and I never tire of it. It's hypnotic, it's moving, and it's one of the standout moments on the album for me. Track 5, Dull Life. Dull Life feels like it could easily sit alongside Show Your Bones. It carries that same DNA, raw, guitar driven, and slightly chaotic in the best way. After the atmospheric build of Skeletons, its brilliant placement in the track list, it reintroduces that heavier edge right at the midpoint of the album. Karen's vocals here are pure trademark. She gives you everything. There's urgency, there's grit, there's that slightly unhinged energy that makes her so compelling. She doesn't hold back, she throws herself into it completely, and you pick things up in repeated listens. This track leans less on the electronic elements and brings the guitars back to the forefront, but it still hits hard. It proves that even within their new, more synth driven direction, they never abandoned that core indie rock punch. I remember this appearing on Guitar Hero, and it was such a fun track to play. There's something incredibly cathartic about it. You can really channel your inner Karen O and just let go for a few minutes. Dull Life is uplifting, powerful, and driven by a fearless vocal performance. It's a reminder that even as the band evolved, that raw energy was still very much alive. Track 6, Shame and Fortune. Now, if I'm being completely honest and maybe a little picky, this is probably the weakest track on the album for me. That's not to say it's bad, not at all. I still enjoy it, and there's definitely a lot to appreciate here. It's just that when you stack it up against the strength of the surrounding tracks, it doesn't quite hit the same heights. There's a slight repetitiveness to it, especially structurally, which might be why it doesn't grab me as instantly. But what it does have is weight. The heavier instrumental tone works really well coming straight after Dull Life. It keeps that raw momentum going and prevents the album from drifting too far into polish. And once again, Brian Chase's drumming really carries this track. There's power and drive in his performance that keeps it moving forward, even when the arrangement feels more straightforward. And I'll admit, this is one I occasionally skip, but within the context of the album, it serves a purpose. It grounds the record and it reminds you of their roots before the next stretch of songs takes you somewhere slightly different again. Track 7, Runaway. Oh, Runaway is an absolute highlight for me. I love the way in how this track builds and unfolds. It doesn't rush anything. It takes its time, allowing each layer to develop naturally. It's driven by that gorgeous piano line, and I only recently found out that it was performed by Greg Kirsten, which was such a lovely surprise. You can really hear that sense of musical depth in the arrangement. Karen's vocals are completely front and center here, and she sounds fucking stunning in the mix. There's a clarity and emotional weight to her delivery that feels almost cinematic. She carries the song with this quiet intensity that gradually grows stronger as the track expands around her. And the production, it's honestly out of this world. There is so much happening, but it never feels overwhelming. It's dramatic and expansive, but full of atmosphere. That instrumental break is incredible. When the synths and electronic textures come in, they add this shimmering layer of depth. And with so many elements in play, you might expect it to become muddy or cluttered, but the production gives everything room to breathe. Each instrument feels distinct, separated, and intentional. Brian's drumming quietly pushes the track forward the whole time, anchoring all that atmosphere with steady momentum. And when it finally reaches its climax, it becomes this huge, satisfying wall of sound, emotional but controlled. It's one of the most powerful moments on the album. Track 8, Dragon Queen. Dragon Queen is a complete shift in sonic direction, and that's what makes it so exciting. It's funky, laid back, and built around this gorgeous groove. The bass is smooth, the rhythm feels effortless, and there's that disco infused guitar weaving its way through the track. You could easily imagine someone like Nile Rodgers stepping into the studio and feeling right at home. It definitely carries that chic inspired shimmer, and I am absolutely here for it. And remember, this was way before he collaborated with Daft Punk in the huge disco revival that followed later on in the 2010s. This is exactly what I meant when I said this record felt ahead of its time. You would never expect the same band that gave us something like Art Star to lean this confidently into funk and disco textures. But here we are, and they pull it off. It's incredibly catchy, but not in an obvious over the top way. It just grooves. The production is rich and layered, with those glossy synths adding depth without overpowering the rhythm. Nick's guitar never dominates the track. You know he's there, but he's adding texture, little flickers of funk, subtle rhythmic details. It's tasteful and controlled, and there's some generally brilliant guitar work happening beneath the surface. This is definitely one to listen to on headphones. There are so many small production details tucked into the mix that you might miss on a casual listen. It's smooth, stylish, and another reminder that this album refuses to stay in one lane. Track 9, Hysteric. This track gives us a softer moment as we move towards the end of the record, and I absolutely adore Karen's vocals here. There's a warmth to her tone in the verses that feels incredibly sincere. She sounds almost reflective, more inward than dramatic. And as the song opens up into the chorus, It drifts into this dreamy, almost dream pop space, which is something I hadn't fully appreciated before. It's subtle, but it's there. Her voice is crystal clear in the mix. There's no clutter, no chaos, just space. The production feels warm and comforting, almost glowing. It wraps around you rather than demanding your attention. And what I love about this track is the restraint. They're not chasing intensity or trying to explode into something huge. It's controlled, measured, and quite tender. Hearing this side of the band is really refreshing as it shows another layer to their artistry. And as the penultimate track, it works beautifully. It calms everything down slightly, preparing you emotionally for the closing moments of the album. Track 10, Little Shadow. I love the direction they chose to close out the record with Little Shadow. They could have easily ended on a huge banger disco moment, something explosive and dance floor ready, but instead they went somewhere more delicate. It almost feels like a lullaby. Karen sounds beautiful here. Her vocal is soft and controlled, but there's still strength underneath it. It's restrained power. And as the track progresses, it slowly expands. When we reach that instrumental break, it becomes deeply atmospheric, drifting into almost dream pop territory again, with those subtle shoegaze textures swirling in the background. It gives me strong Cocteau Twins vibes. I might be slightly off the mark, but it's something I noticed when revisiting the album for this episode. There's that same hazy, immersive quality. It's a gentle but confident closer, not dramatic for the sake of it, just fully realised and intentional. And I have to say, a tight 10-track record is something we don't see much of anymore. The Yeah Yeah Yeahs really understood the assignment here. It's quality over quantity. We're so used to albums now stretching to 18, 19, 20 tracks. And while there are definitely exceptions that pull that off, it's a difficult art to sustain. 10 tracks feels classic, old school, focused. It works beautifully on vinyl too. 5 tracks per side. And whether that was intentional or not, it just feels right. And if you still need a little more from this era, there are acoustic versions and bonus material floating around on streaming. It's nice to know the world of its Blitz doesn't quite end when Little Shadow fades out. Before I finish, I have to talk about Karen O, because you simply cannot discuss this band or this record without recognising just how iconic she is. What makes Karen so compelling is her fearlessness. Like Susie Sue before her, Karen has always performed like there's nothing to lose. Whether it's the raw, chaotic energy of the early days with her fuck you attitude or the sleek, synth driven confidence of its Blitz, she commits completely. There's no half measure with Karen. On this record in particular, you really hear her range. She can be explosive and untamed on Zero, theatrical and commanding on Heads Will Roll, vulnerable on Skeletons, and tender on Little Shadow. Not every front woman can move between those spaces like she can, and boy, she does it with ease. Her unique wardrobe, courtesy of her friend Christian Joy, is an extension of who she is. She is absolutely stunning, and there is no one else like her. And she truly makes me want to have a fringe or bangs again. She doesn't just sing songs, she inhabits them. There's character in every line, intention in every shift and tone. And visually, aesthetically, performance-wise, she has always brought something slightly otherworldly to the indie scene. Glitter, drama, emotion, unpredictability. She made it glamorous without losing the grit. I urge you to watch their Letterman performance of Zero. Karen is absolutely mesmerising. She delivers a live vocal with ease, full of smiles and charisma. For me, Karen O represents a moment in indie music where things felt bold and exciting and slightly dangerous. She proved you could evolve your sound, lean into synths, experiment with disco, embrace pop, and still maintain credibility. She is 100% authentic and so real, and we love her for that. And that's why It's Blitz isn't just a great album, it's a statement, and Karen O is at the heart of it. For me, this album isn't just an indie classic, it's a reminder that evolution is powerful, that taking risks pays off, and that sometimes the boldest move you can make is changing direction entirely. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. If you've enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate it if you could follow, like or share, as it helps other music lovers to discover the show. If you're listening on YouTube, don't forget to like and subscribe to the Indie Pop Girl podcast. I'm posting full episodes, shorts and little teasers over there, so there's always something new to watch. Let me know in the comments what your favourite track from It's Blitz is, or if there's an indie classic you'd like me to cover next. I always read them. You can also find me on Instagram and Threads at The Indie Pop Girl, and on TikTok at The Indie Pop Girl Podcast. And if you want to dive even deeper, there's a public Spotify playlist called Favourite Tracks from Podcast Episodes, where I add some of my top picks from each record I cover. It's updated as new episodes drop, so you might just find your next obsession. I'll be back very soon and continuing the Indie Classic series with a bonus episode. I'll be talking about a record from a cult indie artist who'll be dropping her new record the same day my episode will drop. It will be such perfect timing, and I'll be teasing on my socials nearer the time, so stay tuned and I'll reveal all soon. Until then, I'm Rachel, the Indie Pop Girl. Thanks for listening, take care, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.